Welcome, folks. You are listening to Real Estate Talk, and once again, I'm your host, Ken Sax. I am the designated broker for Keller Williams here in Spokane. I've been in real estate for about 26 years. Our topic today is going to be around the first-time home buyer. So you finally are in a position, congratulations, where you're going to be buying your first home. Great decision. Now what? So our guests today, we have Tonya Tyler and Flann. Folks, tell us the quick 30-second intro on you.
Yeah, okay. Well, thanks for letting us be here, Ken.
Yeah.
It's exciting to get to talk about these things.
It is.
So I've been in real estate for a little over 3 years now, 2 years in production, sold about $10 million in volume my second year, and I get to help over at Keller Williams with you now and watch agents just grow their businesses and help clients at a high level.
And you've worked with first-time home buyers.
I have worked with first-time home buyers. They're actually, I mean, quite frankly, they're my favorite group to work with.
I agree. There's so many good things about that, especially just seeing them get their first home.
Right.
You know,
It's so exciting.
It is exciting.
Yeah,
I love
absolutely.
It.
Good.
I love it. I'm Tonya Tyler, and I've been in production for almost 4 years. I'm also a first-time home buyer certified teacher.
That's right.
For the state of Washington.
Boy, we got the right person.
Yeah,
you teach the class.
Yeah, so I teach the class. And my next one is going to be in March.
Okay.
So we don't have the date down yet, but it'll be in March, probably the end of March. And it will certify people that are actually going to use the bond program. So that means the down payment assistant program that the government has put together that helps people get into their first time house. So this might be your first time.
Yeah, I'm a
and you don't
first-time
need
buyer.
it,
So
and maybe you don't need the first time. Maybe you don't need the down payment assistance program. But there is that for people that don't have the big chunk of change in their savings to put down for the down payment. So we do have that the government offers for the state of Washington.
Right. So that's actually, I'm glad you said that, because how many first-time buyers would even know that? When you're talking down payment, you're talking, what, 5% to 25%?
Right, exactly. And to be honest with you, the percentage is actually probably higher. A lot of people don't realize the one reason why people don't buy a house is because of fear. They don't have the money and they just think wealthy people can buy homes and that's it. But in fact, a lot of my clients actually do need the down payment assistance program, and they have a little bit of money in the savings for earnest money and that kind of stuff. So they do take it. So yeah.
Good. So first-time home buyers, the first thing that you're going to want to understand is that there are down payment assistant programs offered through Washington.
Yep.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Okay, I'm getting excited now.
Yeah.
I'm ready to look at homes. Are we
I know.
ready, or what else should I know?
Well,
What else should
I think to tag into that, one of the
Yeah.
things that's super important is talking with a really qualified lender. And so the great part, like with you, Tanya, I'm sure you have lenders in your world that understand those programs, because not every lender operates at the same level there.
Exactly.
And so it's that partnership between your agent as that first-time home buyer and a lender, because the last thing that we want to do is, as agents, is go take someone out and look at a house that they actually can't afford. And so that's where getting that relationship with the lender who can actually look at the numbers and say, hey, you know what? I'm so excited, Mr. First-Time Home Buyer, here's what you're actually pre-qualified for. Because first-time home buyers, they just don't know what they don't know.
Right.
And so if you talk to the expert lender, which of course you need, and if you talk with the expert agent, which of course you need, and those two, if they're working together, it's all the better for that first-time buyer than to go out and actually be excited with the knowledge that they truly can buy a house.
So the first question I would say is ask the lender, for the client to ask the lender, do you offer that down payment assistance program? Because not everyone does. They don't have access to those programs. So that's what I would ask. I know a lot of people do start with lenders, and then they find out halfway through the process, they've already started getting this, that they don't have that money and that they don't offer it at that location or that institution. So that would be the first question, to make sure. How many first-time home buyer have you assisted? Have you worked with?
Yep.
That's another question.
Well, and when I think of lenders, I think of a few things. I think of each lender has a different toolbox that they're working out of with different tools. And so oftentimes we'll get first-time home buyers, or just even buyers, period, who they either have a relationship with their bank, whether because they've had a savings or checking account, or first-time home buyer, maybe their parent has had a relationship with a bank and so is insisting they use, Bank ABC, which Bank ABC may be awesome, wonderful, and terrific, but they have just their toolbox. And while they're good with online banking, checking accounts, savings accounts, we're talking about a home mortgage. And so I always encourage people as well, talk to a loan broker or two who has access to multiple toolboxes. So don't just talk to one bank or lender, talk to 3 and see, hey, what different programs do you have? The other thing I thought of as you were talking about a lender, when do I talk to a lender? And I'll tell people as soon as possible, because when most people, when they talk to a lender, is when they're ready to submit an offer. And then they call a lender.
Right.
But talk to them, buyers, as early as possible, because, and I don't mean to be hijacking the show, but this is an important point.
Oh, this is huge, yeah.
Talk as early as you can, because a competent lender is going to look at your credit score and they will be able to coach you on what you need to do to have that score as high as possible when the time comes to buy the house. And the difference there is money to the buyer, because the higher your score, oftentimes the better program, lower percentage rate you will get. And you are making this payment every month for 360 months.
Right.
Is it not worth your time to talk to a lender early on?
You need to know, and even if you have low credit score, I don't want anybody to ever be fearful. You got to just know, look underneath the bed, the monster under there. Let's figure out what that credit score is. And then hopefully that lender will keep you, give you like a list of things that you need to do to pay off and things you don't need to pay off to get that credit score up.
Exactly right.
And you'll start to go up, which is wonderful with being able to buy that first home.
Right. And it might take 6 months, a year,
I've had a guy
18
a
months.
Year. I had a guy a year and he had low credit score, which is fine. And I never judged. But I said, follow exactly what the lender said. And he did. And almost to exactly a year, he was able to go out and start to look. And we got the green light. So
well, and what's so cool is, right, when you say 360 months, it's like, hey, if it's a 12-month wait, and you have a group of people rallying around you to accomplish a goal, I mean, that's an incredible piece of why we're in this business as a whole, and kind of going back to like first-time home buyers were my favorite people to work with, because like you're helping them establish a new chapter in their world.
Yes.
Right.
And that's just so fun to be able to do.
Good.
So that's what I would say. Get your lender and get that going so we know. And here's the difference between pre-qualifying and pre-approved. I'm really big on this. I mean, you can fill out the application. They can roughly say you are pre-qualified for X dollars, 200,000 or whatever, but we want to see really after your documentation is in, submitted into the lender, and we're talking about your taxes, 2 years taxes. We're just approaching into the 2020 right now. Some people haven't even filed for 2019. You need to do that ASAP because they're going to ask for that. And then they're also going to ask for bank statements and pay stubs and all that stuff. And that sometimes is a little bit of the pain, but I think if you can get through that piece and get it all submitted, then you're more solid versus not having any of it, because we need that pre-approval letter to write that offer. And we want your offer to be solid.
Sure.
And I always say we want a solid offer because it's better than, oh, I'm not really sure where you're going to end up. So that would be my recommendation.
And that could be a very emotional process. And when you're talking about all the documents a buyer has to prepare, it reminds me of a practice I adopted years ago because of the frustration and anxiety that buyers were experiencing. I'll start with, here's a folder. Everything that the lender is asking for, then put it in your folder, because they could ask for the same thing months later. And if you don't have it readily accessible, you're going to start getting distraught. You're going to get upset. You're going to get angry. And there are people who have then not bought a home because they just couldn't take it anymore.
Right.
So if you're giving them your tax returns or pay stubs or whatever, just put it in a separate folder. Right. So that 2 months later, when the lender asks it again from me again, instead of like, oh my gosh, like I just gave that to you. Oh, okay, here it is again. Right. And if you want it next week, I'll give it to you again. Eliminate that.
And I just want to state that you're right on this, because all those documentations that the lender's asking for, they're asking because behind the scenes, those processors need it. And
Right.
sometimes you don't know that. So that's just something that I love that idea about the folder because
Yeah.
they keep asking for it.
Yeah.
I remember I just purchased a house not too long ago, and I thought every time the lender called, I was like, oh my gosh, what do they need again? And it became stressful. So that talks about the emotion that goes into buying a house, not just outlooking the excitement, but the stress that you're sometimes can experience with this can be a little overwhelming.
Yes.
So, and it's just, you go from everything from doubt to, did I get the right house, to fear, to, everything, excitement, everything will go through you.
Yeah, and that's where it really comes back to who are you working with as your agent, right? Like that agent needs to almost control the pace,
Sure.
right, on a high level, because you aren't expected to know everything, nor should you as a buyer, especially a first-time home buyer. And so make sure that you're working with an agent who's not matching the stress when they call, right? Like, oh my gosh, we need it. It's like, no, like, hey, Jim, we need this document and it's important because XYZ. So for the agents out there, right, leading with solid, we've got you.
Yes.
And then for you as that first-time home buyer, as you look for an agent, don't just pick the first one that's at an open house you walk through that you saw on Zillow.
Right.
Interview agents.
Or a friend of a friend.
Or a friend of a
friend's
friend. Yeah, exactly. Pick the pro.
Yeah. Good. Okay, so first-time home buyers,
Okay.
what else do I need to know?
I think that understanding the market. So hopefully your agent will explain understanding the market. We are in right now an inventory crisis. I mean, in Spokane, we just are short of inventory. We don't have many houses on the market, and hopefully spring is going to show a little something different. But that's something just to know, kind of like, you got to know if the agent says this, we need to offer this at list price. Don't try to keep going underneath what they want to offer. If it's a $200,000 house, don't just say, I think it's worth $175,000. I've had a buyer just recently who kept offering, we're at $400,000 for all the houses we're looking at, and he kept offering, he wanted to go in $30,000 to $40,000 because his cousin kept telling him, hey, the market when I bought it, 20 years ago, you don't do that. You just get low,
Right.
lower price. We lost out on 2 houses. We offered, and I kept explaining to him, but he said, this is what I want. Okay, we'll do it. And we lost out on 2 houses. So we are at our 3rd house, and we are at the point where we're moving forward now because we offered list price and we got the house.
Good.
So,
Awesome.
But it's interesting to know the market, and it can be stressful.
I have found, and I was sharing this before the show, I have found that buyers and first-time home buyers, especially because they are taking advice from everybody, including like HGTV and things like that, that they will lose 2 to 3 homes before they finally ask their buyer broker, Tanya, how much do you think we should offer? Oh, Ken, I'm so glad you are asking for my advice on this, unlike the last 2 homes. But there's just this thing out there that we have to ask less than what the list price is. And if your buyer broker has competency, they're already going to do a market evaluation on the house you want to see where the list price stacks among the competitors.
Right.
So, okay, how does that help me? I'm a buyer broker. First, align with somebody you trust and is competent, then listen to them. And if they tell you to offer asking price, if you really want the house, then offer it. You know, so many buyers and even sellers, they get caught up. Well, let's stick with buyers. They get caught up on the price. Well, what are you qualified on? The price or the monthly payment? You're qualified on the monthly payment.
Right.
Exactly. And a lot of first-time homebuyers don't realize.
A lot of buyers don't even
a lot of
realize
buyers.
that.
That's how they get that $200,000 or that $300,000 is what you're qualified monthly.
Yes.
So I always ask when we're going through this process. I have a lady right now who's qualified up to $395, but she doesn't want to spend that monthly. So I said, what do you feel comfortable with? Now we've got a price. Now we're at $325, and that's great. She's comfortable with that, and we can find a house for that.
Well, and what's really important in that spot too is, don't just buy what the bank says you can buy or the lender says you can buy, right? I mean, so I've seen that where I've had to counsel people to spend less. And so sometimes it's, as an agent, like, hey, are you comfortable if we take a look at your budget? Because sometimes for some home buyers, like that's just something that hasn't happened before. And so the idea of that payment, like look at that payment and what does that actually mean to your real world,
Yeah.
not
Right.
just
Yep.
what that loan officer
Right.
says you can buy.
Exactly.
Really important.
I would say another thing is as a buyer, and we're going back to HGTV because you mentioned it, but HGTV has given you this world of, everything, and everything looks great. But as a buyer, as you're going through this, it's your first home and everything, a lot of my buyers will come in and they just have long lists of what they want. And I always say, okay, so as we're going through, we might not get the granite countertops. Are you okay with that? Yes. So I always find out what is their real heart of what they, those must-haves, that heart of what there really is. I have a lady right now that's getting ready to close in next month. Her must-have was a garage. She's moving up here from another state that doesn't have snow, and she said, I don't want to deal with the snow. And I said, okay, so we've got this great house that has a garage. That was my must-have. So I know what your must-haves are. So as a buyer, know what your must-haves are. So you go, I might not get the granite countertops. I might not get that 2-car garage. We're okay. We're not in the exact area, but we're around it or nearby.
Right.
This is your first home. A first-time home buyer stays in their house 7 to 10 years. We're seeing sometimes they're actually going lower than that right now. They're jumping, even 5 years, 3 to 5. So realistically, sometimes that first-time home buyer home is just your starter home.
Right. And the reality is, I've had clients with custom homes, and as soon as the custom home is done, they're like, oh, I wish I would have, right?
Exactly right.
So the reality is, there is no real perfect home. There's
Right.
close. But the key is having the reality talk of, hey, what really is most important? Because like we've, shared, it gets stressful. Extra paperwork, or the lender calls again, or whatever it might be. If you know that these are the 3 things that you want in a house, and you've seen other homes, it's a good point to go back to when you're in the middle of some of those challenging times, because nope, I wanted the garage.
Right.
I wanted the open concept. I needed the 3 bedrooms, or 2 or 1, whatever it is. But just knowing, not the laundry list.
Right. Exactly.
Well, and you mentioned granite countertops and things like that. You can change those.
You can change them,
Right.
and that's what we talk about, the cosmetics,
Yep.
Wallpaper on the
Yeah.
walls. There's
Who
a wall
cares?
behind there, so let's find that out. Another recommendation is for the first-time home buyer is once you're in contract, go to your inspection. Your inspection would be the next thing. Go to your inspection because you're going to learn a lot about the house, of what's going on. If you can spare even an hour, typically they're about 3 to maybe 4 hours long, go and ask your inspector some of the things that you need to know, because you really will find the heart of what's going on in that house. I love that word, heart. I don't know why I'm on it.
It's a good
but
word.
you'll find, because your home is your heart. But you will find out more information about your house, spending 2 to 3 hours. It's also your time to get in there and measure where your couch and your bed and all that stuff. So that's a wonderful time to make sure you do get to go to the inspection if you can.
Yeah, good. And when we were talking about, I mentioned earlier what I call the backyard barbecue. And the backyard barbecue, and I literally have this conversation with buyers. So what it looks like is when your friends and family and loved ones find out that you're in the market, everybody's going to be giving you advice as if they're an expert. Now, maybe they're, an accountant or a fireman or whatever else. They don't do what we do every day, but they love you. They don't want you to get hurt. They want you to be successful. It can be so much that you become paralyzed, scared, and you make no decisions. You maybe end up not buying a house because you're so freaked out. And so to try to control those emotions and manage those emotions, I'll ask them, just write it down. The things they're telling you, you never pay asking price. Write that down. And then when we meet, I'll say, Rick, get out your folder. Let's go over your questions and we'll talk about them. Because otherwise you will become paralyzed. You'll freak out. You'll just become emotionally distraught. And you can't talk about first-time home buyers without talking about parents.
Right.
You can't.
One of the questions I used to ask was, are there any other decision makers in this process?
Great.
Oh my gosh, that's a great
question.
one. Yeah, I know that I didn't ask that on one of my clients, and her parents were part of it. And that was one of those big things. And you realize through the process, like, oh, your parents keep coming with you. So it's part of the process because they are going to be that decision maker. It's not just sometimes just one person or two people. Sometimes it's an entire family.
Right.
So you need to have them.
Yes. And so, I had a story I shared on an earlier show where I had a listing of a house, and it was, our average sales price now is close to $300,000. So this was years ago. It was $165,000, and we were priced $15,000 less than the next competing home because my seller was very motivated, had to sell quickly to get into her next house, and it was worth it to her to leave that money on the table to get that house. So we list it, and I get an offer, and it's less than asking price. And I thought, what are we doing? And so I called that broker, and the broker said, well, her dad
Dun, dun, dun.
said to her, my first-time home buyer, her dad said you never pay asking price for a house. I thought, well, so-and-so, what if the house was priced at, $5,000? Would you offer $5,000 or would you come in at $4,000? Well, of course you would come in at $5,000. So then what Dad said doesn't hold water because, of course, there's a point where you're going to pay asking price, and where we were priced is the point. But what was so unfortunate, and I'll never forget it, is that her buyer, who was a first-time young woman, did not get the house because Dad told her, nope, you don't pay asking, and we sold it the next day or within that week to another buyer. So, look, your family, of course they love you and they want to help you, but understand where they're coming from. When was the last time, Dad, you bought a house? Well, 30 years ago. Okay, write it down. We'll talk about it.
And maybe it's even that point of, hey, Dad, would you call my agent?
Right.
Because that's where, right, as the professional, we have to be comfortable going, I don't want to say toe to toe, but like have reality conversations on our client's behalf, even if it's with their parents or whoever it might be, because our job is to help them accomplish their goals.
Yeah,
it's
you
so
bet.
true. That's so true. And I did talk to a dad in California because same thing. The daughter's like, can you just talk to my dad? I'm like, yeah. So it is one of those things that because this has so much emotion attached to it. I mean, even if it's your first or it's your third house, there's still emotion and there's just so much going on. You just want to be more prepared and you want to be a little bit more in the driver's seat. I always say, I'm going to put you in the driver's seat, but I'm going to be the passenger and I'm going to drive. I'm going to direct you. Take a left, take a right. And as we're going through this process, it's about empowering. And I hope that you find that peace as you're going through it as a buyer of that empowerment, no matter who it is, what you're working with.
Yeah, gosh, great advice. We're down to about our last minute. Again, my guests, Rick Flann, Tonya Tyler, both with Keller Williams Spokane. And let's not forget, Tanya teaches the class on first-time home buyers. So it's awesome that you're here. Any last, I know I have a kind of a last comment for somebody.
Of course you
do,
Ken.
You guys have any? Yeah, of course I do, right?
We probably all do, right? That's our world. I think that the biggest thing is why, right? And we talk about this a lot at the office, but like, why are you buying this house, right? And when you have clarity around that of what it can do for your future and your family and legacy and fill in the blank, then all of this initial like stepping into the water of real estate, it's way more doable, especially when you have the right person or people in your world to walk you through it. Like you're not alone. Like there's people, professionals who deal and work with these things all the time. Find the right ones.
Good.
At the end of my class, I always give a list of questions for the clients to interview the agents. And I think it's important. I want them to feel good that, again, they're buying this house. They're empowered. It's your biggest investment. It might be the only investment that you ever do, but you want to be empowered. So come up with a list of questions and find out this is, you're not going to just take a bag of money into the bank. You need to know who's taking care of your money.
Good. And the last 30 seconds, here's my advice, buyers. Don't buy that car or that new garage that you don't own yet. Don't quit your job. Do not go out and spend $8,000 on new furniture that you're putting on credit for the house you don't own yet. Because we have had many people who then cannot buy the house because their credit and their ratios are now not in a position where they are now approved for that loan, because the lender, just prior to funding, just prior to the money being transferred to buy your house, they're going to do another check on your credit and they're going to see what you've done. So don't do that.
That's a good one. Yeah.
End there.
Yeah.
End there. That's
All
important.
right, folks. First-time home buyers, thanks for listening. Join us next time. Ken Sax, and you've watched Real Estate Talks.
Ask a question, recommend a guest, or hear this program again on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or SpokaneTalksMedia.com.